Hi everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the James and Brown podcast. I'm your host, Raj, and with me is my lovely co-host, Spencer. Spencer, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing really good. I'm actually excited to get this show on the road.
Yeah? How's the wedding planning going?
Pretty good. We're pretty excited. Closing into the 3-month range is a mix of emotions that I can't really explain in one sentence. So
I can't wait to get you a ridiculous gift. So today we're talking about a series that's quite new within the last couple of seasons and very near and dear to our hearts. It's called Samurai Flamenco. So Samurai Flamenco at its core is sort of a love letter to all superhero genres. If you ever watched Power Rangers while growing up or Batman, it's just kind of a love letter to all the kids in the world who grew up wanting to be a superhero. And it revolves around a main character called Hazama Masayoshi, who his dream has always been to be a hero. He wants to help people, he wants to save people, he wants to do good. And so he dresses up in this ghetto little costume, and he tries to do good by helping people, for example, cross the road, or telling people to take out the trash, or not letting people smoke in non-smoking areas. So, Spencer, what did you think about this series?
Well, I really liked it at first because, unlike all the other superhero animes that I would watch, it was really raw and really like natural. It felt like he wouldn't go anywhere big. That's what it felt like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it felt like he would just kind of do what he was doing for the whole anime. He would go around, kind of that feel good, helping the people because he was nothing, right? How do you think about his character? Like, what did it strike you as at first?
Very kind of delusional, but grounded in reality. He knew that he wanted to be a superhero, but he also knew that superheroes couldn't really exist. But despite that, he fought the nagging feeling that you can't be a hero, and decided if there are no superheroes, I'll make them myself. But for that reason, I didn't like the anime at first like you did. I found it really boring because he was just kind of it was kind of slice of lifey with a superhero twist on it. And really what made it for me, or what kept me going in the first few episodes, was Goto, who's the side character. Goto is a policeman that Masayoshi meets within the first episode, actually. He is kind of our everyman. He's just a normal police officer. He has a girlfriend. He lives alone in an apartment. And he thinks Masayoshi is just a weirdo who just wants to dress like a superhero. He doesn't turn him in. He actually kind of looks after him. And he's sort of our anchor in reality, where Masayoshi kind of goes and does his own thing. So that's what kept me into the anime for the first few episodes anyway, before it really got going.
What really saved Goto for me, because I didn't really like him at first, because I couldn't really get his character. But the moment when Masayoshi goes into that crowd of kids and gives them that huge speech that goes all over the internet, but the one who comes and actually saves Masayoshi is Goto, and it's just like, he comes after him, but then he goes to his house every day after and eats like the curry, right? Like there's that moment of bonding. I don't know. Like I really thought that the anime was going at a more slower pace. Like there wasn't much violence. It was really like lighthearted. And that's when we meet, I think Triple M comes in at that point and kind of brings the next twist, the first twist of this anime.
Yeah, there's 3 girls. They're known as, well, we just call them Triple M. They're basically 3 idols. They form an idol group that Masayoshi meets. In his day-to-day life, he's actually a model. And so during his modeling career, he meets these 3 girls. And one of them is as obsessed with superheroes as he is. Mm-hmm. And he finds this out when one day he gets kidnapped while doing his normal Samurai Flamenco deeds. And it looks like he's going to get killed. But then she rides in on a Hummer.
Pink Hummer, yeah.
Yeah, and then just beats up all the people who kidnap him and proceeds to kick them in the balls.
Oh, my goodness.
She has no mercy. She causes everybody pain. And she saves him like that. And she's actually irritated that Masayoshi becomes a hero before her. She wanted to become a hero as well, and she thinks that he stole her thunder. And the only reason she didn't go first is because she had to get her driver's license so she could drive the Hummer, which she kept failing.
Not gonna lie. At the end of that episode, when all 3 of the girls come out in costumes, I was a little concerned. I don't really like a lot of fan service in anime, and I was really enjoying Flamenco just for the fact that it was all about a guy doing good deeds. There wasn't really any bad things that were going on within it. So I just really liked that part about it. But then they appeared, and I was like, oh no, here it goes. So, yeah.
On the other hand, I was really happy when they appeared. Unlike Spencer, I enjoy a good amount of fan service when it comes to the anime. But yeah, when they appeared, they added a whole new twist to it. Suddenly, Masayoshi wasn't alone. He did his superhero deeds with them. And at times, they would actually compete to see who can do the most good. The only problem is Triple M actually... They did it for glory. At least the main girl did. Do you remember her name? I'm kind of blanking on it.
For which girl?
The main girl of the Triple M.
No, not Mary. I don't know.
No, it was Mary, wasn't it? Mari?
No. Mari's the other girl. The black-haired girl.
What black-haired girl?
The one who loves the main girl.
Oh, Moe. Yeah, that's Moe.
Oh, Mary's married.
I think it's Mari.
Mary's not, yeah,
so she does it for the... Sorry for the tangent there. She does it for the glory. She wants to be recognized and thinks it makes life exciting. So after the introduction of the Triple M, we meet, for lack of a better word, the weapons guy.
The weapons guy.
He basically confronts Masayoshi and says, hey, you're going to die because you can't take criminals on with just a silly little costume and a little helmet. You need weapons. But weapons are illegal. So I'm going to turn office stationery into weapons. So he does things like turning staplers into nunchucks and like tape into rope. That just helps Masayoshi get by. He still doesn't hurt people, but he mostly uses it to get away from people who want to hurt him.
And at this point, I believe it was at this point that news reporter guy came in and offered the bounty on Masayoshi's head. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. There's a guy who likes Samurai Flamenco because he gives him a lot of publicity. He's similar to Mari, where he kind of wants an interesting life. So he uses Flamenco in order to get hits and stuff and make his life more interesting. So he puts a bounty on his head for a large sum of money, claiming that anybody who can reveal who the identity of Samurai Flamenco gets the sum of money. And then there's an entire episode where Masayoshi is just being hounded by the public for the bounty.
What I really liked about it was in that final moment of that episode where that one guy corners him in the alley and he gets to try out another one of his weapons. And at this point in the anime, a new weapon has been revealed pretty much throughout that entire scene. Crazy stuff like he was saying, the Batman tape measure, and this one final moment he gets these sticky gloves that lets him climb up the wall, which I thought was pretty cool because it was Spider-Man-ish. But then the guy follows him up the wall up a rusty pipe. What I liked about this moment is it really showed Masayoshi's kind of true character, because even though he's really nervous about his career and the fact that if he got revealed he'd be kind of messed up, he still dove down and like saved that guy. And the reason that I like that so much is because this was like a realistic anime at this point, right? Like he could get hurt, at least that's what it felt like, and he actually like really hurt himself falling off of that into the alleyway, falling down and catching the guy and saving him. And at that point he gained a lot of respect from the people, and they called off the bounty, and then they moved on, which leads us to the next part where he actually gets kind of acknowledged by the police force.
Yeah, he becomes he kind of gets Superman syndrome, in where the public trusts him, and so no longer is he kind of like this evil vigilante or this annoyance that he was before. Now he's actually someone who people recognize that he does good, and they support him in that. So the police actually request Goto to contact Masayoshi because they know that he has met Flamenco multiple times. Mm-hmm. And so they say, we're going to do this raid for publicity. The raid is real, but we want Flamenco there for publicity. It'll show that he has close ties with the police. And this is where we need to put our spoiler warning on. If you're interested in Flamenco at all, which I think you should be, it's a really good show. This is where you need to stop listening to us, because we're going to get into huge spoilers.
Something called the gorilla moment. And after you hear what we're going to say or watch the anime, you will refer to any giant plot twist as the gorilla moment for the rest of your life. That is guaranteed.
Yeah, this gorilla moment cemented two things. One, Flamenco is no longer predictable. And two, Flamenco is the king of plot twists. So during this police raid, Masayoshi corners a drug dealer, or a druggie, and he runs away and just pops a pill. And then he starts freaking out, and you're just thinking, oh, he overdosed. That's kind of weird. And then he transforms into a gorilla with a guillotine in his stomach, and he proceeds to kill multiple police officers with said guillotine.
Like, not just kill, like, you gotta understand, up to this point, Flamenco has been semi-bloodless. Like, the first kind of blood that we saw was when Mary appeared, and they bust into the hideout with the Hummer, and there was blood and, ball kicking and all that kind of stuff. And it was lighthearted and fun. And at this point, nobody really has died. And then all of a sudden, the gorilla comes with a guillotine and proceeds to actually decapitate on screen policemen everywhere. And our shock was very much reflected upon Flamenco and Goto.
Yeah, needless to say, both Flamenco and Goto were just paralyzed in shock and fear.
Like, if you understand the moment of fear, anybody who's watched Titan at all, that first episode, Aaron's mom, I think you understand the fear that we were feeling at that point. Like, the pure terror of what an anime can actually make you feel was like, what the heck is going on? We were seriously concerned, super pumped, and I don't even remember. It was just crazy.
So Masayoshi and Goto fight off the gorilla. Goto tries to shoot him, but bullets actually deflect off its body because it appears to actually be armored somewhat. And so Masayoshi uses one of his weapons, which essentially is just a falcon punch.
I would put it more to an elephant punch, like Luffy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess it's a lot like Luffy's third gear in a way, with air. So he punches the gorilla out of the building, and this is a very high building. So the gorilla falls, lands on a car, and he gets up, and he's perfectly fine. But then he just screams, "Viva torture," and he explodes. And so...
And that's when we get introduced to the fact that Flamenco is not as grounded in reality as we thought, because a giant projection appears in the sky of a guy named King Torture. And King Torture is this maniac who declares that he is an evil organization, and he challenges Flamenco straight up, which doesn't sit well with Mary.
No, she gets very irritated that Torture puts all of his focus on Flamenco. He makes a public broadcast a few times, and each time it's always directed to Masayoshi. He's basically, he tries to be Masayoshi's arch enemy. He doesn't care about the Triple M. He doesn't care about them at all. He only cares about Menko. He keeps talking about how he's going to destroy Menko and how he's going to ruin him. And at this point in the show, it turns kind of into a Kamen Rider-esque series where every episode there's just another villain for Masayoshi to defeat, and he explodes. Similar to Power Rangers. And they also have like little goons like putties from Power Rangers. Like one episode in the following episode they fight a bird, which Triple M and Goto shoot down along with Masayoshi. And then they fight a horse. They fight some armadillo.
I'd just like to point out that at this point in the series, it begins to get very childish, in my opinion. Up to this point, it was very adult-like. The drama was very real. Even the guillotine gorilla and the hawk were the two most scary, I guess, kind of frightful monsters. And at that point, it begins going downhill. Like, there's a curve where Masayoshi gets really strong and used to fighting, and the monsters get really lame, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. They become really weak, and stop being a challenge altogether for Masayoshi. It becomes kind of like daily life where he just beats them easily.
I was beginning to get to a point where I wanted to actually drop the series, because the series that I had loved was the day-to-day underdog fighter that was Masayoshi's Flamenco. And all of a sudden he gets thrown into this world where his fight is real. And I understand it's an anime, but for me, I've seen enough of those kind of anime. So I was getting really disappointed in the series itself.
And this is actually where the brilliance of the show shines through, because the episode where you wanted to drop, the preceding episode brought you right back in with the climax. Yeah. Or it was the episode before the climax, rather, where the reporter that we mentioned before that put the bounty on Masayoshi, he gets captured by King Torture and is actually tortured by him into bringing Mari as bait for Masayoshi. So this guy's tortured, like brutally tortured. To the point where he's like, when he gets out of it, because he eventually succumbs to torture, to King Torture rather, and he's just bloody all over and he's really badly hurt. And at that point, that's sort of where the episode ends, I think.
It was kind of alluded to that he was to turn somebody in. And I think what happened was just before we see the reporter on screen getting tortured, Mary actually issues a challenge to King Torture. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
I believe so. I think that Mary was so fed up with Masayoshi getting all of the credit that she actually calls out King Torture, I believe on TV.
Yeah, it was on TV.
And just pretty much declares that she's the one who's going to beat him and she won't stop until she's done and all this stuff, that she's not afraid. And King Torture doesn't take too lightly to that. Hence, he is actually torturing the reporter in order to get her there, which leads to our next episode, which at this point in the anime, there was the gorilla moment with the guillotine. Then there was this real lull in any kind of violence. Like they would explode. People would die kind of in the public, but it was off screen and it was really alluded to.
No, people stopped dying, I think, after the second or third monster.
It was really getting really kind of boring, cliche, really childish, right? Like I was saying. And then all of a sudden we see the reporter and then it gets to Mary. And that's where it gets kind of rough.
Yeah, so we cut to King Torture's hideout, basically, where he has Mary chained up and he has Moe chained up. And he has already tortured Mary, but not as brutally as he tortured the reporter. And he gives Moe an ultimatum where he says, if you agree to take Mary's place, I'll let her go. And I'll kill you instead. Or I kill both of you. I think that was it.
I think Mary was the one who was captured first. And I think Moe actually came to find her. I think that's how it went. Or because I think they didn't get captured at the same time.
I'm not sure. I can't actually remember.
Regardless, they were there. She was actually getting that ultimatum.
Yeah. And so Mary tells Moe to save herself, but Moe just decides, no, take me instead, save Mary. And this is kind of normal in anime, where you're like, yeah, of course she's not going to say that. You're friends with her. But Torture put a twist on it. He frees Moe instead, and he says, the only reason that you would give yourself up for her, despite other than your love, is because you knew when she told you to get away, she didn't mean it. She wanted you to die so Mary could escape. And that's why I'm letting you go, because of your bravery.
But what was really kind of sick, in my opinion, about that was before that whole exchange, there was some really close-up, nasty plier pinches on Moe's fingers. And I actually cringed my gut because it was nasty. Like it was pinched. I don't know. It's kind of gross.
There was a very vivid scene where King Torture takes some pliers and crushes Moe's pinky finger, just all the way. It was really impressive.
And so even through that, Moe was standing strong. And what happened there is, eventually, before Flamenco gets to that area, Mary is broken. Like she's at a point where she's actually really broken. Like she feels like really, we can't really tell what emotion gets revealed later, but something's wrong with her. And we're going to lead into the lead up for Flamenco, how he gets there.
Yeah, Moe's sacrifice really breaks Mary because she sort of stole Mary's thunder, where Mary wants to be the hero, but Torture inevitably made Moe the hero there, and that doesn't sit right with Mary. So both Goto and Flamenco show up to King Torture's hideout, and Torture has the old supervillain, hey, I have a bomb, I'm going to use it to blow up Japan kind of deal. And so Masayoshi just says, Goto, you take out the bomb, I'm going to go handle Torture. And Goto is just like, I'm a policeman, you want me to take out a bomb? What the heck is wrong with you? But he goes and does it anyway.
What I like about Goto throughout the entire series, you're going to find, is he speaks for the viewer. Pretty much, if something doesn't make sense or something is just completely off the wall, Goto will say so, and he will be the norm, and he will normalize the moment.
Right. He's our anchor.
Yeah.
And so Masayoshi and Torture have their final battle, where Torture actually decapitates his own arm and attaches a chainsaw instead. So they have their battle. Masayoshi ends up impaling Torture, but it doesn't end up killing him. And he actually reveals that they're both very similar. Torture also grew up watching heroes. He loved watching Power Rangers and Kamen Rider and stuff like that. The only difference was he found the world to be cruel. He didn't want to be a hero despite loving them. He wanted to be a villain because he knew if there was a villain, there would have to be a hero to stop him. So he knew the only way for he thought that for a hero to exist, a villain also needed to exist. What do you think about that?
Well, I found that really kind of cliche a little bit. Like it was the cliche hero versus villain moment, but it also leads up very closely to the other encounters that Flamenco will get, and it's beginning. This is where we actually began having our doubts about the validity of this. We were beginning to doubt at this point if Masayoshi was dreaming, I believe.
Yeah, we had a couple of theories bouncing around. One was that this is all just Masayoshi's delusion, and he's actually just dreaming or in a coma or something. Another theory we had was that he might have a power to bend reality, and so he's just shifting reality to his own will. Because it would make sense since he's fighting such a cliche villain, and he kind of went through the Kamen Rider storyline where he just fights a new boss every day and he beats it easily. So that theory made the most sense to me.
But during that battle, actually going back to the battle itself, we begin to understand that my dreams of the series returning to its roots was vastly disappearing due to the fact that King Torture was coming back to life after being stabbed. It was being revealed of some sort of like alien ability to attach machines to his arms. Like things were going kind of crazy at that point. All said and done, King Torture falls. Goto gets in a cop car and
he did in the Hummer.
I love the Hummer, the pink Hummer. Yeah. He gets in the pink Hummer, drives up and out, and in one of the cooler scenes of the anime, which kind of cemented Goto as the man crush of my heart. He did an awesome, James Bond barrel roll out of the pink Hummer as it nailed the rocket ship and they escape. Oh, it was good. That was a good scene. I like that one.
And at the end of the episode, Masayoshi actually reveals on TV that he was Flamenco the whole time. And that was a big reveal. And we didn't really know where the series was going to go after that. We thought it would just be the fallout of everything in Torture.
And apparently neither did the creators. Because what we're finding out very quickly is that, I believe I'm correct in this, Samurai Flamenco does not have a manga base. Is that correct?
I think you're right about that.
Yeah, I think that it was an anime created for anime. And in that, I have never had a plot twist like the gorilla moment, but that was about to change again.
Yep, Flamenco implemented a second gorilla moment where, we forgot to mention that Flamenco actually found a master who was actually an actor on one of his old superhero shows that he watched called Red Axe, and his name was Kaname. So Kaname takes Masayoshi in as a student and teaches him how to fight and such, and so he sort of backs him up along with Goto and the weapons guy. So after his fight with Torture, Kaname comes out to Masayoshi and says, "Quick, there's no time. There's another villain. We have to defeat them." So he picks up Masayoshi and flies him to this command center where they just have hundreds and hundreds of personnel. And he says, "Listen, I need you to become part of the Flamengers. You will be Flamenger Red, and you'll fight alongside Pink, Blue, Black, and Green. And you're going to defend the world against a new enemy called From Beyond."
And at this point, I was a little flabbergasted. Gone were the days of simple Masayoshi fighting a crazy old lady who's not supposed to put her garbage out at night and eating curry with Goto at the end of the day. Now, what? Like, where did all of this come from? Like, how in the world did they get away with building such an intricate high-tech base and gathering? I was blown away. Again, my dreams of going back to old flamenco were completely lost.
So at this point, we transferred from Kamen Rider into pure and simple Power Rangers. So From Beyond they sort of had this sea base where I think they had 4 generals, sort of like in the first season of Digimon. They were like the 4 big mega Digimon where you had to fight at the very end.
Needless to say, it was completely cliche.
Yeah, so one of them comes in and ends up killing all the Flamengers that Masayoshi was supposed to originally team up with. So Kaname calls all the backup Red Rangers that he had sitting there, and they all become a team of Red Rangers. So after some fighting and deliberating among themselves, Masayoshi ends up becoming the Red Ranger, and the others become the other colors.
And at this point, they begin to pretty much steamroll the plotline. They're just so overpowered. There isn't really a battle that lasts any longer that they don't end up pulling a Kamina and transforming epically into something that will help them win.
Yeah, they go through the normal Power Rangers formula where a monster shows up, they beat the monster grows, they get into their mechs, form the Megazord, and then they kill the monster.
And that all happened in the first encounter, I believe.
Yeah, that all happened in the very first Power Rangers episode.
And after that, they just kept winning. And understood that they kept winning. No matter what, they were like, let's just wouldn't it be easier to transform into the Megazord? Like, they would always talk about how it was actually very easy to beat it. And one thing that made me laugh is that you watched an episode where they beat the first general, and by the next episode, they'd already beaten all 4. It was just jumping so much faster than Flamenco used to.
Yeah. And so From Beyond reveals that the 4 generals were really just an appetizer. I think next what they had 64.
64 or 32. I don't know which one.
Yeah, I think they started going up in powers of 2. And so the numbers just kept getting bigger and bigger, the amount of people they had to fight, until eventually they get into the all-out assault, which involved over 100, I believe.
I don't know. I think it was in the thousands, if I remember correctly.
Or maybe you're right. It was quite a few. So From Beyond basically announced that they're going to do an all-out attack against Japan, and they're going to wipe out the country. And at this point, the Flamengers all become heroes. They've been heroes in the public eye.
This is where Flamenco, again, and it seems to be a kind of plot form that it goes realistic start, really cliche middle, and then it gets to be back to realism at the end. Because what happened was, for what it's worth, the Flamengers creation was pretty realistic, and then it got really cliche. But now at the end, we're beginning to see like levels of politics and like nationalism that you find in movies like, I don't know what movie it was, but like a meteor, like those movies about meteors crashing to the earth and the politicians try to save themselves, that kind of thing. That was beginning to happen in Flamenco, and that was something that was I liked. I liked that kind of plot line. Like, what happened was the prime minister actually asked the Flamengers to keep quiet about the invasion so that the politicians would have time to escape before there was mass panic.
Right, so they're asked to keep quiet, and they need a few days to escape. But they're each given, I think they can take 3 people with them. That was multiple.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So Masayoshi really only has Goto as a friend. So he goes to Goto, and Goto actually, without knowing what's happening, gives him this speech about how he never thought Masayoshi was really going to amount to anything when he first met him, and how he's just kind of a freak who was kind of cosplaying and doing good. But he thought, as long as you're doing good and not bad, it doesn't matter what kind of freak you are, I don't really care. But Goto says that where we are now, you're doing more than just good. You're a true hero. You're doing really great things for this world, and I'm proud of you. And that really brings a conflict in Masayoshi, because he believes that what a great person would do is tell everybody in Japan to run away. But what he's been told to do is be quiet. And really, his hero status is somewhat tied to what he does.
Throughout the anime, we actually were noticing a change in Masayoshi, where he was this inspiring hero that was amounting to really nothing. He was doing the good deeds that he wished everyone would do. He became kind of a common writer a little bit. And what we noticed, and even Goto noticed, and Goto's girlfriend, was that Masayoshi was getting kind of arrogant, a little cold towards his tasks. He was getting really dead-eyed. He didn't really care. At first he cared that the people were dying, but then when he started killing the torture agents, he just ended up not really caring. But when King Torture died, Masayoshi actually came back to his normal, righteous self. And so now we're finding Masayoshi going full circle into a moment where he actually defies the prime minister.
Right. On live TV, he tells everybody to run away and that From Beyond will do an all-out attack. So mass hysteria tends to break out. And the police do their best to defend everybody. It should be a point to mention that Mari has fallen in love with Goto. And after the destruction of her by King Torture, she moved in with him temporarily to just try to get herself back together. And so when Goto goes to defend the police station, because they're housing civilians in police stations while the attack is going on, she begs him not to go. But he says, it's my duty as a police officer. I need to protect the people.
And all throughout this, Masayoshi's master had gone, I believe, missing. Right after the announcement, hadn't he gone missing at this point?
Yes.
Yes, he had gone missing. And everyone was in panic because they believed that he had just abandoned and leaving Masayoshi kind of in charge. And the Flamengers were kind of torn because they didn't know whether or not they should run or they should stay. And I believe that there was one moment where Masayoshi gets online and kind of calms the panic in Japan just before the big attack.
Yeah, that's right. He does a stream of sorts where he tells everybody that where to go to shelters, the police will protect you, and more so the Flamengers will protect you because they have not abandoned the people. So the Flamenchers and all their allies in their base, their headquarters, they get together. And they even get in their Megazord, and they just fight off the hordes and hordes of the From Beyond monsters. But it gets to the point where it's just too much for them. They're overwhelmed by the thousands of soldiers.
And this is the moment that you really liked, so I'm going to let you tell this moment. But I actually have a confession. I didn't really grow up watching Power Rangers. And so this whole section of Flamenco really felt cheesy to me. But Raj really had a nostalgic moment.
It brought out the little kid in me. Kaname comes back with every actor who's ever played a superhero in their own costumes with their own crew. And they just have this moment where every superhero that Masayoshi grew up with was suddenly real and alive, and they had come to save him, to help protect the people. And it's just that moment in, if you've ever seen Power Rangers, where suddenly like previous teams come back to help the current team and just defend against some new enemy. And it just made me so happy. It actually made me tear up a little bit just remembering it, because it was so beautiful. And it was at that moment where I truly, truly fell in love with the series. It was just so good.
It's kind of the opposite for me. I was falling out of love with the series at this point because I still wanted to go back to how he was before. And it was all falling apart. I mean, they had giant mechs. There was millions of heroes. I didn't even know what to do. And so what happened near the end is being inspired by all the heroes that had appeared. In the meantime, just kind of clarifying a point, From Beyond had actually sent this giant Japan destruction device to fall into Mount Fuji.
It was basically a bomb.
Yeah, and it was going down. It was trying to get Mount Fuji to erupt. So clock was ticking. They jump in and manage to... They're fighting off the volcano bomb, pretty much, at this point. And they're fighting it off, and they realize that their mech is running out of energy. And so in one final attempt, they use all their energy to, I believe, do they drill it? Or what do they punch it? I don't remember what
they punch it, they kick it, they elbow it, they drill it, they did everything.
And then finally the bomb breaks, but it explodes, and they don't have any energy to escape. But with one final move, with a flying fist, they escape out of the volcano, and everything's good, we think.
They basically rocket punch their way out of the volcano. And then they get a phone call of sorts. And it's the final member of From Beyond. And he says he wants to talk to Masayoshi alone. So Masayoshi agrees and gets out of the mech hand. And he just walks down the volcano. And he's met with someone who looks exactly like him. And he introduced himself as his brother.
And what we find here is a moment where we're like, oh no. Because at this point, we've come to the understanding that flamenco changes. It changes genres after a set moment of time. And we were at that point. And so the From Beyond, I believe it's Beyond Flamenco. I think that's what they call them.
Yeah, I think they called him Beyond Flamenco.
He pretty much issued a challenge to why Masayoshi was even trying to be a hero. Why was it worth even fighting in the first place? But Masayoshi says he needs to. He feels the need to fight for justice. And in that, Beyond Flamenco actually accepts that, walks up, and gets Masayoshi to shoot him. And he dies. And I was like, whoa, because there's a giant hole in his stomach. And at this point, we were like, oh, okay. And right when he dies, classic, all of the monsters that had been invading the city had fallen. Just let's quickly talk about the police station with Goto and what happened there, because that kind of leads up to...
Yeah, that was great. The police station was actually swarmed by a few Beyond monsters, and normal people can't handle them, and the monsters were just deflecting bullets. So Goto and two other police officers were actually really close to being killed, when they were suddenly saved by basically a Kamen Rider, but in the show they call him Harakiri Sunshine, and he's just this amazing superhero that I really wish gets his own anime because he's really cool. And he saves Goto, he saves everybody, and then he just leaves on this really cool motorcycle, and he leaves everybody in awe, where they're just like, they're completely inspired by his heroism.
At this point, this is when the genre changes, because I believe they get a hero award again, a second hero award.
That's right.
It's a beautiful moment. I'm really happy. They're all having a parade. Everything's fine. And then something bad happens. And this is the change that I was hoping for. Unfortunately, Masayoshi was the brunt of it.
So Masayoshi's going to visit the grave of his grandfather, I believe, with some flowers. And then he's approached by, I think he called himself Mr. Justice.
Mr. Justice.
He was basically Kaname in an American costume.
Not gonna lie, you thought he was Kaname.
He looks and sounds exactly like Kaname, so I was convinced it was Kaname because, that's what the show wanted you to think, though. But Spencer knew better. He knew it wasn't him. Anyway, Mr. Justice tells Flamenco that he's been tricked and he's in danger. And so at that moment, he's swarmed by government workers, FBI agents maybe, or the equivalent they have in Japan anyway. And they tell him that he's under arrest. Masayoshi asks why, but they won't tell him, and they go to shoot him. And then he's saved by Mr. Justice. And so he and Mr. Justice escape in a giant tanker truck with the American flag on it. And seeing that Masayoshi was somewhat uneasy, he said he would calm him down the only way he knew how, by singing the American anthem.
The most beautiful rendition of the American anthem I have ever heard, no lie.
In the most broken English I have ever heard, no lie.
And it was actually the entire anthem, and it just kept going and going, and it was pretty funny.
So during the anthem, Masayoshi actually attempts to contact the other Flamengers. And the Flamengers, along with Kaname, were all captured, with the exception of Blue, who was actually previously the biggest rival that Masayoshi had to being Red.
In classic Matt and Tai moment from Digimon, they were kind of at odds, and then they became kind of rivals with the cause, so they were kind of friending it up. But in this moment, not only were all of the Flamengers being taken, but all of the heroes, I believe. Yeah,
that's right. So Harakiri Sunshine and all the Power Ranger spin-offs were all being arrested by the Prime Minister. He said that they were the cause of From Beyond's attack.
And Blue, having noticed that the Flamengers are being taken, actually goes out and challenges the Prime Minister, who had helped them before, because the Prime Minister was actually the one coordinating all of the Flamenger activity. It was government funded. What happens after this really kind of makes me really sad again, because Blue confronts the Prime Minister. We don't really know what happens, but it ends up Blue being absolutely decimated and like a 10-meter wide crater appearing after the Prime Minister tells everyone to leave, which really ruins my hope of a realistic flamenco.
It pretty much implied that the Prime Minister defeated Blue with his bare hands, despite Blue having his costume on and all of his weapons. So at this point, Mr. Justice and Masayoshi are in hiding in some rundown cafe. And they're surrounded by police officers, and Mr. Justice lets them escape. And it was at this point where Spencer said, this show's finally getting back to reality. And as soon as he said that, Mr. Justice proceeded to fire a Justice Beam out of his chest to defeat the police officers.
I just want to imply that Justice Beam was probably the most annoying and repeated attack aside from Justice Tackle.
All of his moves started with Justice. It was amazing. So Mr. Justice appears to be captured, and Masayoshi escapes, and he's suddenly Japan's #1 wanted man. The Prime Minister goes on TV and tells him to turn himself in, and that everybody in the world is now his enemy.
We began calling this the Batman stage because we were beginning to understand that they were pretty much writing a love letter to, as we were saying before, all of the superhero / over-the-top mech anime. Anything that was crazy, they were calling for it in this anime. So what happens next is Masayoshi proceeds to be a vigilante. He isn't really doing any justice, but he's running away from everybody. All his friends are not really talking about him. Nobody knows if he's alive. And he actually, I thought it was really touching, but he actually meets a homeless man in the park, a blind homeless man, who apparently was saved by Masayoshi at one point in some turn of events, and in turn saves Masayoshi, giving him courage to fight more.
Yeah, things kind of come full circle there. The blind homeless man is actually saved by Flamenco, and he doesn't know Masayoshi is Flamenco, but he helps him out anyway, telling him that because I, as a worthless person, was saved, I should help anyone in return. Unlike you, I didn't like that moment. I thought it was cliche, and I hated every moment of it.
Cliche? Really? Like, this whole anime is cliche, and you hated that moment?
Yeah, but it's over-the-top cliche.
I like that, man. Like, I'm the kind of guy who likes those cheesy romantic animes and stuff, like the Goody Feels. I like that. For me, the Power Rangers cliche, that was over the top.
I loved it.
Okay.
I actually liked better when Masayoshi was fighting himself to steal food. When he was in the bakery, he was deciding whether or not he should take this food, but he stuck to his hero ways, and a hero should never steal. So at that point, Masayoshi does the only thing left to him. He turns to the one person he has, his anchor, Goto. And so he knocks on Goto's door very early in the morning, and Goto just opens the door saying, "Who the heck is knocking on my door so early?" He sees his Masayoshi and just says, "It's about time you came, you idiot."
And at this point, this is when it becomes more, I don't know, does it go back to kind of Kamen Rider a little bit?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the original way it was, but a little bit more over the top.
So he gets his weapon specialist back with some upgraded weapons, and him and Goto proceed to hatch a plan to take down the Prime Minister.
Yeah, so they basically raid. It was kind of like a UN meeting, and they just bust in, and they, with the intention of talking to the Prime Minister, but they disable all of his security guards and such.
And all the while, throughout, the Prime Minister seems obsessively fixated at his majority percentage. Approval rating of the public based off of public approval vote. And it was kind of like, okay, maybe he just wants to get the next election, but the Batman, the good feeling you get from Batman, no magic powers, no nothing, falls apart very quickly, much to my chagrin again.
And so the Prime Minister shoos away everybody. He says just to leave him and Masayoshi alone. And so he summons the power of every previous Japanese Prime Minister in the form of a mech suit.
A golden mech suit.
A golden mech suit, the mech suit is... The power is directly related to the current Prime Minister's approval rating. And so he proceeds to beat the ever-loving hell out of Masayoshi with his new golden mech suit.
And all the while, that reporter who had actually traded in Mary just for a good scoop, he was hiding, I think, all the while. At least we saw him hiding there. But what they did is the general public, they cut the audio feed of the UN meeting and just showed an image. So for the public's general knowledge, there was the number one highest rated criminal of the country kind of going after the Prime Minister. And so all the while, this fight with no context was giving the Prime Minister more approval rating as he was beating up Masayoshi.
Right, and then the reporter ends up streaming his own audio to go along with the video. And of course, in typical villain fashion, the Prime Minister's monologuing about what he's doing, what his grand plan is, and how he's using the public. And of course, his approval rating starts to go down as people are hearing it from the reporter. And that allows Masayoshi to finish him off in another giant elephant punch, which was really great to see.
At this point, at the end of it, the Prime Minister goes down, and in strictly Gurren Lagann fashion, the main boss explains that he had a good reason for all of this.
Yeah, he was actually using the approval rating to fight off aliens.
And this is another plot twist because, there he is. Mr. Justice walks out of nowhere telling that he is way too tough to fall to tranquilizers. And yeah.
He takes off his mask, which is apparently his skin as well, because he reveals to be Alien Flamenco.
At this point, there's Mary and Moe and that other girl. The one girl we actually like out of the trio.
And ironically, the only one whose name we can't remember.
Probably because she's that normal. That trio begins to say, what is going on? Like, seriously, aliens? Like...
At a great line from Masayoshi, after he rejects what the alien was offering him, which is basically, let's take over the world together, a giant UFO appears above the city. Masayoshi looks up and just says, what the hell is going on? Which is what we've been saying for the past 20 episodes.
The final fight with the Prime Minister ends, and Masayoshi immediately begins focusing on his fight with the alien. There's a moment where they're outside of the building, I believe. There wasn't any follow-up after this. It was immediate, right into the alien attack, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So he's surrounded by his friends. The alien comes down, gives a speech about offering to conquer the world together. And then he leaves a door, which he walks through, to challenge Masayoshi to come through alone.
Yeah, and then there's this great moment where his friends, they all tell him that it's not a good idea to go through the door because it might not lead to the alien. It might lead to some planet where he would just suffocate. Even if he goes through the door, there might not be any way for him to come back. And really, it's just probably a death wish. And Goto speaks up and just says, well, just go then already. And everybody's shocked and looking at Goto, and he says, well, he's not going to listen to any of you. He's going to go. I know him. So go. And Masayoshi just, there's respect and understanding in his eyes as he walks through the door. And Goto, I'm not sure if he says it, but he definitely means it. I think he might have said, I'll be waiting for you.
So he goes through the door alone, and we get left looking at the empty door with Mary. And I believe Mary has come to an understanding that she can never be Masayoshi. Masayoshi is beyond the human capability of separating justice from logical decisions. And I think she finally ends up respecting him for that.
Yeah, and she goes home, I think. Well, Goto just sits there and under the UFO, and he just starts smoking cigarettes, waiting for Masayoshi to come back.
So I believe Masayoshi comes out, and he's at a riverbank, I believe. And it's at this point in the anime that we're like, what the heck is going on? Because the alien is sitting at a riverbank and exclaims, we're sitting at a riverbank because most people are incredibly honest on riversides.
Yeah, most people are more honest on riverbanks. And then there are certain phrases that the alien says in English. For example, sit down and come on. So when he tells Masayoshi to sit down, he yells out, sit down. And
it hurt more than Kuroko's English, I think, in my opinion. There are some moments in Kuroko where the English hurts. This one was just embarrassing.
But it was hilarious.
So Masayoshi ends up sitting down, and they have a conversation about evolution and how the aliens' backstory, what about their planet, they had evolved beyond the need for human conflict and all this stuff.
It's basically the plot of Gurren Lagann at the very end, where he says you attain a new form of evolution, and this evolution prevents any sort of violence.
Which he then offers Masayoshi a stone that can increase evolution.
Yeah, so basically the entire human race would fuse with the alien. And he's actually a culmination of every single race he's visited and had them evolve into him.
In this moment, the alien then begins explaining what his master plan was, explaining King Torture, explaining From Beyond. Is that correct? I believe he explains those people at that point.
I'm not too sure.
At least From Beyond, I believe he explains, maybe. And if it's not him, then it's a little later. But what happens is Masayoshi declines. He says, we don't need this. All we need is justice, something like that. Takes the stone and throws it into the river.
Yeah, so he and the alien proceed to battle, which isn't really much of a battle at first, since the alien, it's his own spaceship, so he can bend reality somehow. So he grows into gigantic sizes and starts beating up Masayoshi, and he ends up stomping on him. But Masayoshi grabs the stone while he's being stomped on and uses it to grow, and he grows to giant size.
And this is where we enter into more Gurren Lagann references, because they end up in space.
Yep, they start fighting on top of the UFO in space, and Masayoshi gets kicked from the spaceship all the way to the moon, and the alien Flamenco follows him, and they just begin battling on the moon.
And in classic hero fashion, there's a monologue between the two, epic battles, but it ends rather anticlimactically with, I believe, like an epic punch. I don't really know what happened.
He punched him or threw him or something, and he just started hurtling through space.
Yes, just flying away. And at that point, we see Masayoshi just lying on the moon, kind of like feeling like everything's over. And at this point, we're waiting for the next thing.
Yeah, because at this point, when the Prime Minister was defeated, Spencer and I were watching this together. And I look at Spencer after the Prime Minister was defeated, and I just said, you ready for the next one? And he's like, yeah, bring on the next villain. Mm-hmm. So at this point, he and I were just looking at this like, all right, who's the next villain? So Masayoshi wakes up, and he's with Harakiri Sunshine.
I don't really know what's going on at this point. I don't think anybody does. But let me just note that there was a week-long absence of Flamenco at this point. We had waited on Thursday, nothing. And we were like, well, it's not any, national event in Japan. What's going on?
A comment I read on Crunchyroll is where we watch it. And so a comment I read was they needed a week to make the preceding episode as insane as possible.
Also, I assume they used the week to try to understand how to stitch their crazy story together, which they end up doing by talking to God.
Yeah, so it turns out it's not Harakiri Sunshine Masayoshi's talking to, it's the universe, or God. And God starts changing faces, like he becomes King Torture, he becomes Masayoshi's agent rather. And he just starts explaining things that my theory was sort of right, where Masayoshi doesn't really bend reality, but subconsciously he made a wish for basically things for him to defeat so he could become a hero. And the universe adhered to it. So the universe created King Torture for Masayoshi to defeat. It created the Flamengers for him to become a part of. And then it created the Prime Minister so that he could have that sort of arc where the hero is abandoned. And it was all based on Masayoshi. And so the universe tells him that if it's up to Masayoshi, he can continue this forever and ever. He can always have more villains. Or he can just end it right here.
Just before the final conversation with the universe actually turns into his grandfather, I believe.
Right, yeah.
And his grandfather proceeds to apologize for the heavy burden that was placed upon Masayoshi, and Masayoshi says it's totally fine. Like,
Yeah, we haven't mentioned it, but his grandfather was actually his main inspiration for wanting to become a hero, because his grandfather loved heroes just as much as Masayoshi, and he actually created the Samurai Flamenco identity for Masayoshi. So the universe actually, or rather, Masayoshi asks the universe whether all of this is real, whether torture was real and what he's seeing right now is real. And he says that for Masayoshi, everything that's happened exists and is real, but for other people, it's just a story. And he closes the DVD case to the Samurai Flamenco series and puts it on a shelf.
absolutely breaking the fourth wall again, but I mean, whatever, right? Anything goes.
So Masayoshi eventually determines, I want peace. If I'm the last source of villains popping up, I want that gone. And so the universe abides and says there will be no more villains.
And we get to a really awesome scene where Goto is putting out his 20th cigarette, just sitting there waiting for Masayoshi to return. Masayoshi does return, sits down right beside him. There's this moment of silence, and I think you know what Goto said better than I do. He claims, like, what took you so long? You know
That's
mean?
right. And Masayoshi looks up at the moon and says, I just went up there. And Goto just tells him to stop bullshitting.
At this moment in the anime, I actually thought that people would forget. I thought it would be a forget moment where Masayoshi would turn back to normal. No one remembered any of his deeds or anything. And quite frankly, I was not keeping track of the episode count, but I thought that was the end.
Yeah, it really felt like that was the end of the series. It was a good way to let it go, but it still had, I think, around 5 episodes left.
That's when we realized that we had never met Goto's girlfriend.
Yeah, you and I were discussing what possible plot threads there were, and the only one we could think of was Goto's girlfriend. Goto's actually in a long-distance relationship with her. You see him texting her constantly, but you've never actually met her.
And one of the beginning moments for old Samurai Flamenco, the one who was more normal, was an umbrella scene where Goto goes out to drink with Masayoshi, and he loses his umbrella, because apparently it's a common thing in Japan where if you miss your umbrella, you just take others because they have a public drop box for umbrellas. And Masayoshi, being justice oriented, did not like that at all.
Yeah, he actually ended up getting on a bicycle and chasing down the guy who had his umbrella, who was traveling by train, by the way. Masayoshi was keeping up by train. He confronted him and just gave him this giant speech of how he shouldn't take people's umbrellas.
What I like most about Masayoshi is, even though he confronted the man for what he did wrong, takes the umbrella back, the guy says, well, someone took my umbrella, so I thought it was okay. And Masayoshi says, well, then let's go find yours. And that was one of the moments that really endeared me to Masayoshi.
Yeah. So after the whole alien business, we find out that the UN has created a new government, a world government, and they decided the world government needs a president. So Masayoshi is actually currently a candidate for becoming the world president, because no one actually forgot. Everyone remembers that he's a Flamenger and that he saved the world multiple times. So he's the best candidate to becoming basically a senator of peace for the entire world.
So everything seems really nice. I mean, Masayoshi's hanging out with Goto again, and everyone seems calm. But then Goto is really happy. For a moment, he's actually going to visit his girlfriend, and Masayoshi's happy because he's that kind of simple guy that's happy when other people are happy. But when he told Mary where Goto was going, that was not a happy person.
Yep, she got very annoyed, and so she goes and tails Goto, and Masayoshi comes along. The reason being, he wants to stop Mary from getting in Goto's way. He wants Goto to have fun with his girlfriend. And so they board the bullet train, I believe, and they head back to Goto's hometown, and they actually go to Goto's house, his parents' house, rather. And there they meet Goto's mother, and she basically just tells him what Goto was like as a kid. And so she asks why they were here, and Masayoshi says, well, Goto said he was going to visit his girlfriend. And she looks at them and says, so he hasn't told you yet.
This is where stuff got a little heavy. Apparently when Masayoshi was in high school, I believe?
Goto, you mean?
Goto, sorry. When Goto was in high school, he had a girlfriend. But one day, and they were really in love. Like, he would text her all the time. They would hang out a lot. But one day, Goto's girlfriend got on a bus alone with a driver and ended up missing at the next bus stop.
Both the driver and Goto's girlfriend were gone, and the only things left were her cell phone and her umbrella.
So at this point, the mom explains that Goto's girlfriend has been missing for all those years. and Goto has gained somewhat of a psychotic habit.
The only way he managed to hold himself together was, unfortunately, he would use his own phone to send himself messages as if they were from his girlfriend.
And all throughout the series, you see Goto kind of talking to his girlfriend in order to gain understanding of what's going on with Masayoshi, to talk about events. He's flirting. It feels really real. And it's kind of like this sick feeling in my stomach when I found out that it was like that, because it was really twisted, and it wasn't the Goto that I'd kind of put up there as somebody who was kind of the everyman normal guy.
Exactly. It was just this big twist for me where I couldn't see Goto in the same light. I felt really sorry for him, and I felt awful that he was going through such pain, and he was just hiding it behind this guise of a dead girlfriend.
So Mary and Masayoshi go out to where his mother believed that he would be, which is at I believe, the bus stop.
The bus stop where she disappeared.
So Masayoshi hides behind the ferns or whatever, but Mary goes right out and confronts him for what's going on, steals his phone and runs. And Goto runs after her. They have this angry exchange where I think she calls him disgusting or something like that.
Yeah, she calls him sick.
Yeah. And she is just probably as devastated as we are.
Yeah, she held Goto up just like we did, but more so because she was in love with him. So it was even more devastating for her that the man who was kind of this anchor was actually really destroyed inside.
But unlike normal anime fashion where Goto probably should have had a revelation, he didn't. He appeared to stick with what he was doing before, and Mary storms off, and Masayoshi does not reveal that he was there.
Yeah, Mary actually seems kind of broken again. She calls the other girls of Triple M together, and they just hang out, and she's just staring off into space, sad. I'm assuming she's thinking about how she can help Goto because she's really into him.
So the next episode, or this episode, sorry, ends with Masayoshi returning to his home after this crazy event, only to find out that it is blowing up right in front of him. But what happened before is he got stopped by this kid, and I'm totally blanking on the name.
Haiji, something not important.
Yeah. Anyways, this kid stops him and says, it's nice to meet you. The building blows up, and the kid explains it was him. And he explains that he was the cause of it, and that I don't think he explained that he's his arch enemy, but we introduced this kind of Joker-like character into the anime, which totally confused us because the universe said there was no more evil.
Yeah, there shouldn't be any villains left, so the appearance of this one was completely unseen.
This brings us to the last episode that's been aired, where Masayoshi begins confronting this enemy. And the enemy keeps calling him, keeps threatening him, explains his backstory. Apparently, as I was referencing before, that group that kind of beat up Flamenco when he gave that really awkward speech that went live online, this kid was a part of that group and became obsessed with Masayoshi to a point where he changed his whole lifestyle in order to become something that Masayoshi could relate to.
Yeah, he claimed that to become closer to Masayoshi, the only thing he could do was become his villain. Just the only villain for Masayoshi, basically his arch enemy.
I thought that was really weird. And the weirder part is, after inquiring as to this kid's existence, all of his friends said that he was a weird kid, a twisted kid, but the weirdest part is that apparently he died, and he died a year before he had met him.
Yeah, he died a long time ago, and everybody says he doesn't exist anymore. And Masayoshi claims that he's the one, and everybody asks, well, aren't you the only one who can see him?
At this point, I was getting nervous that the anime would turn into another Batman moment where the world turned against him, because he could easily be framed for the events that were happening. Nobody found any remnants of a bomb in his apartment. Nobody found any poisoning because he had poisoned his food service, apparently. But one of the things that really kind of broke that theory for me was at one moment he was trying to call all the Flamengers to warn them, and they were all being attacked simultaneously. And then the guy called him and said he would kill Goto, and Masayoshi snaps and says, "I'll kill you." So he freaks out and runs to Goto, and this is one of the sadder parts that I found.
Goto believes Masayoshi and tells him that, listen, you just need rest right now. Up to this point, nobody's believed Masayoshi that a kid's been behind this, and Goto says, it's the reason I believe you that I want you to rest. And this might just be some delusion of yours. And Masayoshi just makes a big mistake and says, you mean like your girlfriend? And in this way, this Joker-esque villain is the greatest villain Masayoshi's ever had thus far, because he's done the one thing that nobody else has been able to do. He broke up Masayoshi and Goto. Goto gets mad. They start fighting physically, and he tells Masayoshi to leave and never come back. He never wants to see his face ever again.
So, ironically, Masayoshi ends up at a riverside and sits there and makes a passing comment about what the alien said about people being more honest at riverbanks. So he sits down and he begins thinking about it. And what I like is that nobody in the anime blamed him, but he's the one who starts accusing himself. And he sees the Haiji guy across the riverway, and he's beginning to think that he's the only one who can see them. So in a panic, he swims across the river only to find that he's not there.
Yeah, before this, Haiji actually taunts him, saying, well, have anyone ever seen me other than you? Aren't you the only one who says I exist? And so Masayoshi does swim after him, and Haiji, or whatever his name, isn't there anymore. It's just empty. And so Masayoshi just lays down on the riverbank and says, then maybe the last source of evil in this world is me.
So after all that, all the ups and downs of the different plot points, I really like Samurai Flamenco. I really wish that it would go back to the way it was before, but I don't think there's any way that it can. I mean, the world went from normal Japan to now a world government. There's been Power Rangers and Batman and Flamenco. Like, it's just ridiculous. But it's really interesting that all the while it was completely expected, but completely unexpected throughout the whole anime, just the plot points and everything.
Yeah, after when they get to the Flamengers part, you and I basically came, and I'm pretty sure most viewers just sort of came to this agreement where it's literally impossible to predict the show, and all you can do is just sit back and enjoy the ride. And I'm quite liking where it's going right now, where the last villain seems to be psychological, or it's Masayoshi himself, and where deep down he might still want to be a hero, and that might be causing this to happen to him.
So, yeah, where it's going to go, I have a feeling that it might not go the way we expect, just because it never does, right?
It's impossible for it to go the way we expect.
I'm thinking that, honestly, I don't know how it can be just in his mind when he was actually affecting the other Flamengers physically. Like, you know what I mean? That girl's hair got cut. Like, there's no explaining that. Well, there is, yeah.
Flamenco will explain it somehow. But yeah, for this series, I highly recommend it. If it didn't have the gorilla moments, I would not have kept up with it. It's just a huge twist. However, us actually explaining what these twists are kind of take away a lot of the fun. But even so, if you've listened this far and you haven't watched the series, I very much recommend you do. It's quite good.
Not to mention the art style, I actually really like it. Like, there's some really good fight battle animation and everything like that, I think. Especially the beginning intro. I really like that intro the best.
I actually like the current intro a lot better. I wasn't a big fan of the first one, but the show's great. The characters are fantastic. The animation's good. Music's decent. It never shows a preview at the end of the episode, which really bugs me because I'm a guy who loves watching previews. But it's great. And it also reminds you that a hero never gives up, a hero never surrenders, and a hero never runs away.
So, this is Spencer.
This is Raj.
And we're signing out. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy Samurai Flamenco as much as we have.
Thank you.